Hello! So today we are in a very peaceful and zen location. I'm visiting my dad in the countryside and I've taken, as you can hear, we've got all the wildlife around us. I've taken my gimbal with me, so I'm hoping to get some really cool shots. But I thought something I'd do beforehand is a dummy's guide to balancing the gimbal. So this is my first ever gimbal. It's the Zhiyun Crane 3-axis gimbal. One thing I would say about the Crane is that the manual that comes with it, I feel like was tailored for people who have used Steadicams or cranes before. So for me as a beginner, I actually found it really quite hard to navigate and quite confusing. So yeah, that's why I thought I'd make this video, to do a real dummy's guide to balancing the gimbal. Okay, so this is what it looks like out of the box. You get your manual, excuse my chipped fingernails, you get your manual, you get the main body of the crane, 2 batteries here, a battery charger and cable, screws to attach your camera to the crane, and the bottom element of the crane where the batteries sit in, and then you screw that onto the bottom. So now we are going to build the crane. This is actually the easy bit. The hard bit is balancing. Setting up the crane is actually pretty easy. So you just take out the main body, which is this, and then bottom element, this bit. I'm gonna pop the batteries in here, face up. Obviously charge your batteries before using the crane. And then screw the batteries into this bottom end. So now the crane is all set up and ready to be balanced. I am using my Sony a7S camera and 50mm lens for today. And the first thing obviously I do is attach the camera to the crane. One thing I would say is that it's so much easier to do on a tripod. The crane has this element here which you can screw into a tripod plate, and that just means you don't have to hold it steady. Your tripod does that for you. But I don't have a tripod today, so I'm going to be doing it without. Putting the camera on the crane, you want to make sure that the battery pack, so the heaviest part of your camera, is closest to the motor, so that way round, and also that the bit of the crane with the symbols on is at the back, so facing the back of your camera. Then you grab a screw from the kit and screw it on. As you can see, there's something similar to it at the bottom of a tripod there, and you just want to screw it in. Cool, so then the camera is firmly on the crane. On the crane there are 3 axes, and this took me a long time to get my head around, so I'm going to do a really layman's description of the 3 axes. So number 1, number 2, and number 3. Then the other things you want to pay attention to is underneath here, this screw that you've just screwed your camera to the crane, and this lever here, and I'll tell you what they mean. So this axis here controls this movement, and that is also determined by this screw, which controls how far forward your camera is on the crane, so similar to how a tripod plate works. Then the second axis, this axis, controls this movement. And the third axis, so that one at the bottom, controls this movement. And these are the 3 points that we have to balance in order to make the crane usable. So I start off with this axis here for balancing, and how I like to do this is hold this part of the crane so that the motor's kind of free to move, and that will show you where best to balance it. So as we can see, the camera is tilting backwards, so that means we need to put more weight forwards. So to do that, first off I use the camera, so this element here, and move the camera a little bit further forward. What you may have to do is adjust this axis here, which I'll show you now. Okay, as we can see, this is pretty balanced. And you'll know it's balanced because anywhere on that axis, you can move it and it doesn't move by itself. Alright, so the next axis is the back one here. And as you can see, if you let that go, it's really heavy, weighted to the right hand side. So to counteract that, I'm going to move it a little bit on the camera, so this point here where I screwed the camera into the crane, I'm just going to loosen that and move that slightly along. As you can see, it's not falling as violently as it was before. And then with this axis here, I'm just going to loosen that and give a little bit more weight to this side. Some chickens are going absolutely nuts in the background, so I don't know what's happening over there. So as you can see now, anywhere on this axis, if I hold the back motor, you can put it anywhere and it's not going to move. So the third axis, and by far the hardest to balance, is this one here. And how I like to do this is I like to lay the crane horizontally on a flat surface, either a table, or you can use your knees if you're sat down. That's always a good hack. And balance it this way round. So you want the camera lens to be facing outwards and the camera to be on its side with the bottom part facing forward. Right, as we can see, this table has got a little bit of wonk to it, but that is completely balanced. To doubly test this, you could also pick up the crane. Yeah. So now our gimbal is completely balanced and ready to use. What I would say is don't forget to put the camera on the gimbal exactly how you're going to use it. So with no lens caps on, battery in, card in, absolutely ready to go, because all of that will affect the weight of your camera and therefore the balance of the gimbal. What's really great about the crane is that it has these number markers, and what that means is that if you have set lenses that you always use on your crane, you can balance them once, write down your numbers, and then have a really clear indication of where the camera needs to be and where all the access points need to be again in future for balancing. It just really speeds things up. Even though the numbers on the gimbal are really great and they make balancing it a lot quicker if you've got a few set lenses that you use on a gimbal, always remember to balance it every single shoot you do. Don't just rely on the numbers, because if you don't balance it properly, it can really damage your crane. So thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. It actually took me a really long time to learn how to balance properly. I filmed this 3 times before I felt like confident enough to do it justice. So I hope I saved you a bit of time with balancing. Please check out my test video, which is coming later on in the week. I'm really excited to film that, and have a lovely day. Bye.